Welcome back to the Just Cash Wellness YouTube channel, coming to you with another episode of the Fully Nourished podcast, a place to explore where female physiology and feminine energy dance together to shape our life experience. I'm Jessica Ash, a functional nutritionist and integrative health coach, and this podcast is really about taking both a scientific and spiritual look at why we as women have become so completely burned out on both a soul level, a cell level, and the real physiological consequences to that burnout. I want to explore together what it looks like to reclaim our feminine radiance and become deeply and fully nourished. With that being said, just as a reminder, everything in this podcast is for education and inspiration only and is not intended as medical advice. Please talk to the appropriate professional when necessary, and please use common sense before making any changes to your diet or lifestyle. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, I am so excited to have you. So, before we hopped on, we were talking about just how we kind of found each other, but I am just so, your work is so different, I guess I should say. Like, I feel like it is a breath of fresh air for so many people that read it. And I just wanted to highlight it to my audience because I'm sure that they will get that kind of breath of fresh air feeling. But we'll dive into your thoughts and just your insights. But just tell me a little bit more about your story. I would love to know just how you kind of arrived here in this place and just a little bit more about you.
Yeah. Oh man, I feel like I never know like how much to share or where to start. That question is asked. I'm like, when I was 5, no, I mean, I was trained as a therapist, or I got like my master's degree in clinical social work and wrapped that up at the end of 2018. And right away kind of started getting certified in things because I'm a bit of an education junkie. So I was learning all about, I did EMDR training and then nervous system stuff and then internal family systems. And then I got really sick, like really, really sick for about 2 years. And for the first year, I was still like working and pretty engaged with life. And the second year, I was like not at all. I was like not parenting. I was in the hospital. It was really bad. And looking back, I'm like realizing the reason I wanted to become a therapist was actually to like not be inside my own stuff. It's like, oh, I'll just help everybody else with their stuff and then I never have to look at me and that'll be great and perfect and I'll be fine. And so I think that was, I mean, the timing was really interesting. Like, I'm sure not unrelated, where I was getting more and more into helping other people and deeper into their systems and then just ignoring mine. And then there was a huge crash. And so when I finally started to get better, it was about actually applying all the stuff that I knew up here, like to myself deeper down. And I've learned so much along the way. Like initially I was so focused on, oh, it was the moldy house that made me sick. And now I'm like, oh no, it was a million other things too. And in large part, the fact that I just paid no attention to what my body was saying and what my body needed. I was really just always telling my body what to do and then trying to ignore and suppress. And I think like a lot of us are. So I don't even know where I'm going with this and how this relates to your question about who I am and my story. But
Oh, that's
I feel,
amazing.
I think I just feel really passionate now because, yeah, I have the education, but I also have this like experience of what it's really like to have things get that extreme. And so there's so many little lessons that I've found along the way. And now I just like want to share all of this. I would say excess information, but it's not really excess because I think it's really important for a lot of us to know this stuff. So I really love to share what I've learned with other people and kind of give people the best shot at recovering from their own stress.
Mm, mm. That's super powerful. Super powerful. I feel like I'm sure so many women resonate with the idea of always telling your body what to do and but never actually listening to what it needs or what it wants and kind of being in that dance or that feedback of like back and forth. Just kind of like head down, barrel through life and never any awareness. And then we have this new, I feel like the work that you got educated in is exploding in popularity. This idea of nervous system regulation and somatic therapy. I feel like everywhere I look at everyone's talking about it. But it feels like the more aware people are of what they perceive to be their problems, it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily seem that we are getting any more regulated. It actually feels like we're almost getting more dysregulated, or we're worse than ever before. And I'm just curious if you see that in your work too, because you're so much closer. Like, or your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like similar to what I was just saying about that, like telling the body what to do, thinking we can stay in the cognitive. I think that's like a huge piece of the puzzle. I was like not raised, but coming into my 20s, I guess, at the time when it was like Women's Health magazine and these like boot camp style workouts and 1,200 calories is how you look good. And so it was like, yeah, okay, I learned this and then I apply it to my body and like make it behave, make it look like this, make it do things. And it kind of worked and it kind of didn't. And it was very miserable, whatever. In the same way, I think we're like, getting access to all this information, whether it's even nervous system regulation stuff or other information, we're so cognitive. So we're using this prefrontal cortex so much. And neuroscientists actually call this part of the brain, I think they describe it as like the primary responsibility is to suppress impulses, which is great because I don't want to start screaming at you if you say something annoying to me in this podcast, for example, right? Like I want to be able to suppress impulses. But the problem is we start doing it all the time. So even when it's safe to express some of those, inner impulses, those instincts that we have to kind of mobilize the stress that we pick up during the day, we don't. And it stays really stuck. I hate that word because I always hate popular words. But like, it really does. Like, it really just starts to accumulate and tax our systems. And so then we go out and we face something relatively minor and we're like, we don't have any room for it. We're so full of this stressful energy that we just like go bananas over every little thing. And then I think, of course, our mind can tell big stories about those things that we learn too. So it's like, whether it's like, IBS is always psychosomatic, and we might get obsessed with that and not accept help at the level of the gut as well. Like we can be so extreme with this stuff. It's like everything is nervous system regulation. Never take a supplement again. Don't change your diet. It's like, well, that's not great either. Like we are such complex beings. And so we need to incorporate it all. I think the constant stimulation is huge. I don't think we realize like, I actually funny that I just talked about our guts, but I compare it to digestion. So I'm like, imagine if you ate as much food as you do consume material on your phone or wherever, right? If you're always listening to podcasts, you're always taking in information. Imagine what would happen to your digestion if you just ate basically all the time unless you were asleep. Like it wouldn't feel very good. And so our nervous systems, our brains really need time to process too. So kind of similar, I guess, to what I was saying about just never letting ourselves release. Like we also don't let ourselves truly rest and like process and assimilate all of these experiences that we have. Like every sound, every new piece of information, like that all kind of needs a chance to move through us in a sense. And that might sound a bit weird or extreme, but it's very true. And it's not that challenging for our systems to do. We just need the space to do it. And we don't tend to give ourselves that kind of real space, Avoiding like big stressors, I think, is a big problem too. That's been really common. I love Jonathan Haidt's work. I don't know if you've ever read it, but around like the coddling of the American mind. He's focused on children. He's doing some work around tech too, which is really cool. But basically just how, we avoid bigger stressors in large part and instead kind of get obsessed with micro stressors that don't lead to like adaptations and resilience. So or like even like kids, it sounds so terrible to say, not that I want my kids to like get hurt at the playground, but like kids' playgrounds are like padded, everything's soft and they can't get injured and they're so monitored. And then adults monitor each other's opinions and language. It's like we're so obsessed with these little tiny potential injuries, and then we like lose, and we're not even trying to, so we lose our capacity to handle big things, and then we're avoiding big things, and so there's no like adaptation to get stronger.
Mm,
We don't
right.
really adapt to those like micro stressors. We don't get stronger from them. If anything, they just again keep taxing us and making us less and less resilient. So yeah. Does that
Wow.
answer your
Yeah.
question? I always
Oh,
go off
yeah.
on these like massive tangents because I'm way too passionate about this stuff.
No, it's beautiful. We have so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where, because you hear, especially in the health space, which I think a lot of my listeners are in the health space, and you constantly hear, and I'm even guilty of this, where I'll tell women, lower your stress, like lower your stress. But what I really should be saying is not necessarily lower your stress, but let's shift the whole way that we look at stress. You are resilient. I think a lot of women are walking through life because they don't feel resilient to anything. But it's interesting how you said it's not from like a lack of information or a lack of knowledge. It's possibly from a lack of rest or a lack of being able to actually assimilate that information and just sit with it and figure out how it interacts with your very real and dynamic physical body. That is just really powerful, because I think so many women think I'm so undernourished. There's been this kind of theme of undernourishment where I need to just fill up, fill
Right.
up, fill up, fill up, fill up. But what if your cup is so full that you feel like you can't move at all?
Right. That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. Yeah. I relate to that in the sense that like I kind of came maybe less from like the nourishing perspective and more on the like, oh, my body needs all this help to detox. Because
Mm.
I thought I was dealing with mold. I was dealing with mold. I really don't think that was as big of a thing as I once thought. But anyway, I felt like what I was getting from this world, this health space, was like my body needed help to purge this mold. I needed to detox, and I needed certain supplements to do this and that, and like force my body to do things. And like my body was like not having it. Like I could take like a micro dose of a supplement, my body would go bananas. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, how am I ever going to heal if I can't take all these things that are going to heal me? And really, it was like, yeah, there's so much stress. Like, it was such a stressful period. I mean, my whole life had been stressful leading up to that point, and then it was obviously a terrible couple of years, like not knowing what was going on. And then I was like asking my body, here, take on more and like figure out what to do with this supplement and that supplement and like keep, changing. And it's like all I really needed. And truly, this was like all I could tolerate for a long time was like, I need to be outside. Like, I needed to walk and I needed to see the sun. I need to play with my kid. Like that was it. Like truly, and I got so much better in weeks, just from turning my attention towards those things that brought me a sense of peace, that gave me a little bit of movement, like that brought light into my eyes. Like it was so simple. So I think a lot of the time when we're just, yeah, we're like stuffing ourselves with things and thinking like, oh, I'm so broken, I need this to help fix me, whether it's to nourish or to detox or to give me the neurotransmitter that I want more of, whatever. Like the body's like, I am trying to do a billion things that you've been asking me to do, and I can't take this. Like I can't handle this extra supplement, and I'm going to show you through symptoms of some sort. And so please listen, you know?
Wow. Wow. Yes. And it's almost like a vicious cycle, because the more you go down these rabbit holes and you feel like you're broken, you're almost in this manic state where
Yeah.
you're just searching and searching and searching for the answer outside of yourself, where it is not as complex as we make it out to be, and it's so simple and sometimes right in front of us. Like what we don't need the biohacking tool, we don't need the device, we don't need the whatever, the program or the course. Like sometimes we just need to, like you said, just get outside and like play with our children, or just have some time with our dog, or something so simple, be
Totally.
present.
I really like to explain, and this is not as common. So the IFS, internal family systems, this whole parts work thing, the inner child stuff is popular, but that's like the pipe pop psychology version of like, I don't know, here, do it at home, play with your inner child or whatever. Internal family systems is this whole framework of therapy that's really beautiful and can be applied at home. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing it up is because I think it's helpful when people find themselves in that place of like, oh, I really need this. Oh, this influencer said that this device is going to be the thing. And if I don't get it, I'm just going to die. Or when we're like in a flare of some sort with symptoms, which is like inhaling supplements. The way that we see that from the IFS framework is there's pain at the bottom, right? There's something needing our attention that's usually causing the symptoms that we don't want. And then we have these protective parts, and their entire job is to prevent pain. So they can get so reactive, and they kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the bigger the pain gets, the bigger those protective parts need to get to suppress the pain. And it's just, I see this constantly. It was a huge part of my system. But anytime there was a symptom, I would either be like looking outside of myself for a distraction, and if the symptom continued to get bigger, which it usually did, then I would just be like just grabbing anything. I'll do like the most crazy detox I can find. I'll buy those supplements. I'll do this. I'll search Instagram for someone who's posted about this, and I'll find the solution. Like, it was just this desperation, it felt like, to suppress it. And all I really needed to do was like turn towards, hey, what's the pain? Like, what am I ignoring? And it still shocks me to this day that it's usually, I don't want to say it's something simple in the sense that it's insignificant, because it's never insignificant. It's usually, like, I don't know, something around connection, or I had this interaction with somebody on the internet and it really like hurt a younger part of me. They really insulted that part, and that part just needs to know that it hurt, like needs me to know that it hurt, and that's it. And I know parts where it can sound a little wonky, but it's so wild how much it can shift things when we stop looking for external, we kind of stop letting those protective parts search for external suppressors and just turn towards it and say, oh, that's it. And how the symptoms can just settle. Like, it truly still blows my mind every single time it happens with a client or with myself, that's it. Like, I spent years looking at like, what's the chemical? Like, oh, I have ammonia, I have glutamate, I have this. Like, I was like so obsessed with all of that. And yeah, maybe that's true, but it can also resolve when we tend to the emotion sometimes,
Yeah, that is very powerful. I know I had to do a lot of parts work, and specifically, like, I kind of came to the same conclusion, is wow, the hoops that we will jump through to avoid our pain or avoid just ourselves, like what our body's trying to say, because maybe, I don't know, maybe we're not ready to face it yet. I don't know, but if we continue to run and run and run and, like you said, distract, it really never gets us anywhere. And in fact, we just keep going down these spirals. I feel like we're getting, in some ways, we'll get worse. I mean, the pain will drive us to, I think of, you said you were struggling with mold, like burn all your things, or just get rid of all of your life's possessions because you are afraid of this mold. There is some very deep layers of like, wow, what we're willing to do to avoid that pain.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. It's amazing. Amazing to see.
I love what you said. I mean, I know you had said on one of your posts, I was just like, oh, that hits hard. You had said, are you using your pharmaceuticals and supplements and devices and diets and homeopathic remedies to save you from the mistakes that you're knowingly making? And that one, I was like, whew, that really hits hard, because I do think in this, I mean, I don't know, I would be curious to hear your thoughts, but if we kind of always feel like we're a victim of something outside of ourselves, in fact, we kind of live in this place of almost a victimization of, I am now a victim to stress, or I'm a victim to these things. And then we're always looking, I call it like white knight syndrome, where we're like always looking for the white knight to come save us.
Yes.
When in reality, we have to kind of save ourselves and take some personal responsibility, which can be very difficult when we're feeling awful. We just want to cry and have a pity party. But at what point are we kind of ready? So I guess, I don't know, your thoughts on just, I don't want to ever blame people. It's not about blame, but I do think there is a level of personal responsibility that at some point we have to say, I need to face it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if my head's just going in this direction because we were just talking about parts work, but I know that it's like people get really up in arms about this whole idea that like nobody's coming to save you, you got to save yourself. And I really get why that sucks, because usually when we're at the point where we need saving, we're like, I can't save myself. Like I am in trouble here. I have nothing. And yet there's like nobody else who can attune to you the way that you can. So like nobody else is going to find it. I tried to get other people to find it. Even when it came to finding the mold, like it was kind of me who was like, maybe this is part of the problem. Like I had to find that. And of course that wasn't going inside yet, but it was something I had to do even when I thought I could never find it. I never would have the energy to discover that, you know? But it's like, I think we do it with our partners, we do it with practitioners, we do it with influencers, even with like friends and therapists, right? Which is like, oh, you'll do this. And nobody can get it right. Like they just can't. And I know when I'm, working with somebody one-on-one that like, I try to get it right sometimes. I try to say, oh, maybe this is happening. And like, that's never what's happening. Not, maybe I can kind of give them an idea and insight and then they follow it and they'll always find something different from what I thought they were going to find. So wow. It's just, even if someone were there and they tried to save you, they wouldn't save you, right? Like they just wouldn't find what you can find. And I think what's so beautiful about IFS is like it really does help in the sense that those parts of you that desperately want to be saved still get to be saved, but they get to be saved by you. Right? You gain access to this inner strength that we all have, but it's just been so covered up by all the burdens that we carry. And once we can find that and go towards the sick parts of us, the parts that feel like they need saving, the parts that are so protective and so suppressive, then we can kind of get out of that feeling like a victim. And at the same time, also have so much self-compassion. It's really the coolest approach. In the sense that it's not like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get up and nobody cares about you and not, it's really beautiful and loving. And yet it is very much about taking responsibility for your own inner world. Right.
Absolutely. I feel like in a way it's almost a mothering of yourself, where sometimes the love of a mother is actually quite tough. It's hard. I think of like a mama bird kicks her baby bird out of the nest because it needs to learn how to fly, and she's there to like catch them, but that is kind of tough. And but that is the loving nurturance that sometimes we need. And we live in the culture of like self-love, like go take a bath or go whatever, veg out in Netflix, and sometimes that's appropriate, but a lot of times the love that we need is a little bit tougher, a little bit like we need to tell ourselves, you can do this and you're going to do this and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. Like self-care is not always like luxurious. Actually, I almost think it's never luxurious. Like I think of self-care as like this self-attunement of actually going inside and like tending to what's there and letting the ugliness come out. And there's nothing beautiful about that until maybe the end of whatever it is that you're working through. And then, like you said, also loving yourself in the sense that you're not going to let yourself have no life. Right. And a life without stress is just no life. So like walking yourself through challenges and saying like, you're going to do this and you might fail. And even if you fail, like it's going to be okay, but not kind of letting your world shrink, I think is a big part of what self-care is.
Ooh. Wow, that's amazing. Like not letting your world shrink. Wow. I had read on one of your posts, you had said it's kind of up to us whether stress heals us or hurts us. Most of us are either constantly chasing insignificant stressors or avoiding challenges at all costs. And we're too distracted to notice. Plus, our internal brakes and recovery processes don't work when we're chronically distracted. So, increasingly minor stressors have an increasingly large impact. Would you say that stress is almost a muscle that we need, or our ability to be resilient to stress is almost like a muscle that we need to work? Like, how can we kind of reframe stress into something that is good for us?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, right? Like you think about a muscle, if you've ever like you've been injured or bedridden for any amount of time, even just a few days sometimes, you can see like your muscles atrophy and things get really challenging. The same thing happens when we go for periods of time avoiding challenges, avoiding stress. We just get really weak. And then we have to kind of start over again and start to face things so that we adapt to be able to tolerate them again. So muscle is like a really good analogy for this, for the nervous system. The nervous system is like, it's really just, it's so brilliant in the sense that it'll just do whatever we expose it. Like it'll respond to whatever we expose it to, right? So if we're like, hey, I want to do a lot of public speaking. Your nervous system's like, all right, well, at first I'm going to get pretty worked up about that because it feels threatening. But over time, like I'll get that it's not threatening and we'll be okay, right? It's like it'll just respond to whatever we choose put in front of it. And it'll, like I said, at first it might have some pretty big reactions to anything that's novel or anything that seems like it could end badly for us. And we have to just learn how to be with that discomfort because it's not comfortable when the nervous system is noticing a potential threat. But we adapt and it changes. And then we have this ability to be with bigger and bigger things that, yeah, allows us to have a bigger and bigger life. So we certainly don't want to be avoiding stress. That idea of like minor stressors, yeah, like the nervous system, because it adapts to everything and because it remembers everything, it also has memories when we don't work on this stuff. It has all these really strong memories of when we were little, and these things that are now insignificant as adults still feel big because there's those young memories that are still like really, really stuck in there. And we haven't done the processing work. We haven't done parts work or any kind of nervous system regulation, right? So then we can help the nervous system kind of learn that, hey, like when someone criticizes me on Instagram, it's not the same as when my mom criticized me and it really, really hurt as a 6-year-old, right? Like, let me help you understand that. Like we can kind of start to rewire these things. It's just like working with the nervous system, understanding what it's doing, continuing to expose it to things so that it adapts and allows us to expand our lives and our capacity for hard things.
Wow. Wow. Would you say that avoidance of stress is almost more stressful than facing it? Or
I'd say in the moment it doesn't feel that way. Like avoiding stress feels great, and facing stress maybe doesn't. But over time, what's going to happen is it's like what could I compare this to? Nah, it's a terrible one. I was going to say like if a baby never had like interactions, right? If a baby didn't have exposure to environments and stuff, and then you just threw a young kid into like a school setting or something, like imagine how terrifying that would be. If you kept a baby like in a room with only one person, it didn't know a lot about the outside world, and then you just throw it in to a setting like that, that's pretty normal for a lot of kids, right? That's not, I mean, we can get into a whole talk about the school system and blah, 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 but let's say it's like, we generally can handle it to some degree. Like that kid would go bonkers. And the same thing happens to us. So if we kind of lock ourselves in a room and then we try to, get back to life, it's going to feel so much more overwhelming than if we continuously choose. And I'm not saying to like throw yourself into the deep end. If you have been avoiding stress, don't like hop into like a cold plunge and then run a marathon and then like get a new job, whatever, all in the same week. It's a bad idea. But like start to try on some what feels like currently tolerable stressors and keep growing that. Life will only get harder the more we avoid it. Because it's not going anywhere. Like outside world is not going anywhere, right? And neither is our internal world. So might as well face it.
yeah, yeah. Like you said, like you can't keep shrinking your world until you live in a bubble and you're just now like, okay, anything that's stressful, no thank you. No way.
Well, because something's always going to burst that bubble. Like, you could try, but like there's going to be something's going to happen in that bubble at some point. And then what? You can't avoid everything. It's not available. It's not an available option. We got to stop pretending it is.
Right, right. So how do you, I guess, what are like an example of tools that you start using, like just an example for people to, if they've been avoiding stress for so long and they need to start doing some type of processing, like what is an example of techniques that you use in your work?
Yeah, I always, it's hard because it can be different for everybody, but I
Mm,
find a lot of people, and this is what you'll find in like most nervous system regulation approaches and programs and stuff. You start with establishing a sense of safety. So that's at the root of it, right? Is like we don't feel safe even when we are safe. And
mm,
so we're trying to find safety in all the wrong places. Okay, this L-theanine will give me safety. Magnesium will give me safety. If I stay on YouTube for long enough, I'll feel safe. Like we
mm,
actually are kind of unconsciously looking for things that'll help us to feel safe and no
mm,
longer threatened. But it doesn't work because those types of external things don't support it. So finding access to what brings you safety, and that can be orienting practices are lovely and they're so simple and they're kind of like meditation, but ultimately it's just this like noticing of what's actually happening in your environment. It's like this really so slow exploration of like there's a plant, there's a lamp, a window, and like truly just taking it in slow enough so that your nervous system can be like, oh, like I thought we were somewhere else. This is okay.
mm,
Like this is safe. And then same thing, like, oh, I notice I'm breathing. And like I notice, this soft shirt that I'm wearing. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it can shift things so powerfully when we start to do this. And the reason it helps so much, this particular practice, is because the nervous system is actually doing that all the time. So it's called neuroception,
mm,
where the nervous system is just trying to pick up on what's outside, what's inside, right? What's happening in the body? Is there a low blood sugar? Is there a faster heart rate? Is there something, is there a smell in my environment that could be dangerous? It's doing this all the time, but it's doing it with all of that accumulated information from the past. And so if we've had something like an asthma attack, let's say, in the past, or a panic attack, and our breathing got really fast and bizarre, the nervous system will be particularly interested in breath rate. So then things like even going for a walk can start to induce a lot of anxiety in a person because it's like, oh, the breath is up. This could be really, really bad. This could end badly. I want to alert the person to that, you know? So when we orient, we kind of start to support the nervous system and understanding like, oh no, it's okay. Like this is okay, that everything is safe right now. There is no threat in the environment. This breathing rhythm is safe. Okay, cool. I can settle. So that's one very simple and kind of introductory example to accessing more safety. But some people do really well with like self-touch, or even, you getting some kind of body work done.
mm,
Movement can be really supportive, like slow movement, especially walking. Walking is just the greatest. Breathing, of course, using different breathing strategies to come into that state of safety. So just starting there is huge. Just starting to feel what it feels like to notice that you are safe. And we have to be careful about that, like cognitive piece again, because you or I right now might say, like, I know I'm safe. Like, I'm just recording a podcast. Everything's fine. But like our nervous system is probably on a bit of alert, right? We're probably a little bit more upregulated than we were an hour ago because there's some pressure with the situation. I could really say something stupid. I could not know how to answer that question. So it's
yeah.
like there's a little bit of energy in the system, and that's okay. But we want to help it realize like there's no tiger here. It's gonna be okay. And especially afterwards, like it's over. The threat is definitely gone now. We can come back and
Mm.
recover, right?
Mm, wow. I think that's a really powerful piece because I feel like whether it's health or nervous system work, whatever it might be, we kind of start to create this idea in our head that I think we don't define it for ourselves, but we're chasing after perfection. Like this idea that
Mm,
we're going to get to this static place. Like once I get to a static place with my nervous system and nothing is ever stressful, I'm going to be at that pinnacle of health. Like that's when I reach the goal. Or I never have any symptoms at all. Like that's
mm,
the pinnacle of health. And I feel like so many women are chasing this pinnacle, feeling that there's something wrong and something broken until they get to this undefined kind of
yeah.
unachievable place. And so to hear, oh, it's okay if my nervous system starts to react to a situation, but it's in our power to shift it to a response almost. Like instead of just a reactionary, like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared, it's okay, I can feel myself. I understand why my nervous system is feeling this way, and I'm going to choose how to respond to the situation instead of a complete mindless reaction. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Our nervous system and also our immune system, like everything within us is always going to be responding to the outside world, and the outside world is always changing. So there's no static anything here, right? Like
Right.
we can develop, I think, a sense that we are static in the way that we trust ourselves to respond to what's going on inside. Like that can be the goal. Like I trust that I will always turn towards myself and take care of those things. Like now that I am here, I will see my symptoms as communication. I will, mobilize the stress that I accumulate at the end of every day. Like we can trust ourselves to do that. We can't expect, there's no such thing as static in the human body. Like we just can't expect that. Even right now, like there's just every second, there's so much happening inside of us. Like we can't expect things to stay the same. But that being said, the body does tend to communicate in similar ways. So we all kind of have these unique symptom pictures typically, right? Like I know when my stress gets a little bit high, it's like digestion and sleep. Those are my things. Other people, it's like they'll have PMS symptoms. It'll be more hormonal, whatever. So it's like you get to know that those things are communication, and you can sort of tend to them a bit sooner, tend to them before they get so big that you're back in that really like chronically ill, not well state. That too is available. But yeah, getting to a place where the body stops talking to you, I mean, that's like when you die. So don't look forward to that.
That is a perfect point. I loved what you had said. I think one of your posts, you were just talking about how there can be, I think for a lot of us, we're doing everything so mindlessly that intention and awareness is really important. But then you said that some of us never needed to focus more heavily on what's inside. Some of us need to learn how to get outside of ourselves. And some of us went there and got stuck. So now we're not just aware, but hyper aware of what's happening inside. And we hate working hard. We feel even more stressed and less resilient when we're in this place and disconnected from the world around us. We are trying to build capacity, but not obsess over perceived limits. And I was like, whew, whew. I mean, we're always trying to kind of define our perceived limits. So as people start to cultivate more internal awareness, is there a place where this kind of shifts and becomes almost like we become too hyper aware and hyper attuned and it keeps us stuck?
Yeah. So that I was thinking about neuroception again, actually. So what I just described about the nervous system kind of being aware of the external and internal world. There is often like the nervous system will start to get a little bit more focused on one or the other a lot of the time, and wherever there's been threat. So if you've been chronically symptomatic, the nervous system often is like very focused on that. So there's like a lot of awareness and then a lot of response to the sense that something inside is off, right? But that, again, is super uncomfortable. We don't like it. We hate it when the nervous system feels threatened because it feels like anxiety, and it can feel like anger and fear, and sometimes even more like depression and collapse and shutdown. And it's just like not a cozy place to be. And so then we will often intentionally either focus outside. That's my thing, obviously. Like I'm just like, I'll just get another degree and then I'll be fine. And then some people have turned like go over the top and focus their mind internally, and I think that that's like a big issue with a lot of the advice that's like popular on the internet. I think because so much of our pain is ignored, it feels really good when we come across a post that like tells us to really focus on the pain, but we're not doing it in a way that's actually healing. We're doing it in a way that's like yeah, obsessive and anxiety provoking. We're just like, oh my gosh, I have a sensation in my stomach. Oh my gosh, I am anxious about this. Oh my gosh, I don't like what that person said. Like we just have started to get our minds so trained to obsess over these things when the mind usually can't help all that much either. So, what's interesting and still hard for me to remember because I can be such a cognitive person, um, is that a lot of time we don't need to figure anything out or like do anything fancy. We just need to notice, like, oh, there's a sensation. Let me stay with it and wait until it shifts, or let me listen to it and see what it needs. And then that's it. There's nothing more than that. We try to complicate it. Yeah, I think so much of the advice out there is just encouraging that, and the health space too, where it's like, this is a little bit different, but just like, here's what your nails say about your health and your eyebrows and your hair and your skin. Oh, if you're bloated a little, oh my, you must have SIBO and the parasite and you need to, it's just so many things to focus on. And it's like, I don't know, sometimes bellies bloat and then it goes away. It's like not always a thing that you need to treat. It can just be a thing that you're like, oh, I need looser pants today. Like, fine, right? The body is really smart at working through a lot of things. But when we add to the stress by now thinking about it and focusing on it and then throwing extra things at it and telling big stories about it, it's less able to get through it the way that it knows how to, right? So much of this is just like, let your internal world do what it knows to do. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I think that is sometimes the hardest thing because it's so in today's world, it's so easy to do. Like try to do your way out of this, whatever it is. Like carnivore your way out of this, keto your way out of this, vegan your way out of this, like you said, protocol your way out of this. And I think there's this ever ending hunger where you're always going to hop to the next thing because until you listen, the pain doesn't go away. So it just keeps morphing and changing, and those symptoms will keep shifting as well. So, that hits very hard because I think a lot of us do that. And we almost get attached to it and we get attached to, I think it feels like there's almost an addictive quality to it where we always want to continue to make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And in fact, is it possible for us to just, like you said, sometimes bellies bloat and move on with our day?
Totally.
Is it possible to not expend all this energy and resources on creating a story around every little thing in our life?
Yeah. And it makes sense because a big part of feeling safe is actually choice, which sometimes we kind of turn into control. So it makes sense that we would want, if I just eat keto, then this uncomfortable thing or this thing that I'm perceiving, my nervous system is perceiving as threatening, that'll go away. Great. That's exactly what I need to feel safer. But of course, it's not really controllable, a lot of this stuff, not in the way that we want it to be. We can listen to the body, and if the body is always reacting to a certain food, be like, okay, my body doesn't like that right now. I'll try again in a couple months, but maybe I'll remove that stressor because there's obviously a lack of tolerance right now for whatever reason. Maybe related to there's just too much, right? There's so much stress. Maybe dairy's off the table for a month or two while I'm really stressed, and then I bring it back in and I can tolerate it later. So that is there. But this idea that we can exert enough control over everything that we don't like it's just going to land us in more dysregulation. And we also tend to think that the bigger the symptom, the bigger we need to react to it, right? So it's we're really bloated or we're really constipated, then I have to bring out all the big guns. And interestingly, it's so often the opposite because of the body's overwhelmed, right? That's so often what it is. The body is just overwhelmed by all of the inputs that we give it. We just need to do less. So when we're constipated, just okay, I'm going to maybe back off wherever I can for a bit and give my body time to process, right? Process all the emotional stuff, all the, cognitive stuff I'm taking in, all the food I've been eating, all the supplements I've been trying. I'm just going to give my body time to break that all down, and it'll likely poop again. If I just let it, I don't have to force it, right?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And that can be the hardest part, I guess, because in doing that, you really have to. I know you talk about this a lot, like surrendering to the body's response, like feel all of it. Like, if you had a stressful day, and there's a lot of adrenaline running through your veins. Like it's not like, oh my gosh, I gotta go take the like you said, L-theanine, or take the herb, the rhodiola, and I'm gonna breath work my way out of this and yoga my way out of this, and like, okay, I gotta do this, this, and this. You always talk about surrendering to the body's response, and I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding what that means or what that looks like.
Hmm. Yeah, I often find that an easier place to start for a lot of us is listening to the body and then kind of following its cues. So
Mm.
when I approach nervous system work with people, I kind of think about these two ways of practicing. One is going towards stillness and creating safety, and the other is mobilizing stress. And so sometimes, even though this is not really popular, but like nothing I say apparently is, um, starting with mobilizing can actually be really helpful. So when there's something going on in the body and it feels stressful, working with it in a way that moves it a little bit so that we start to fear these sensations less, right? So, like, let's say we hop off this call and I'm like, oh, my heart rate is quite elevated and I feel a bit, oof. I just did this thing that stressed me out a little bit. My nervous system is expecting me to move because historically, if there was a stress, we would be fighting or fleeing. It's very weird to sit and be stressed. The nervous system's like, what are you doing? You're an idiot. Like, get going. So then I might want to do some kind of movement practice or go for a walk and like get that flight energy out if that's what it is. Or if I'm starting to feel angry for whatever reason, like that's usually more like pushing type, like strength building type activities that can really support that energy. So tapping in and sort of in an attuned and intuitive way, moving that survival stress. And then you start to recognize, not just cognitively, but it's like felt sense way, oh, like I'm bigger than that. It's not going to swallow me whole. Like I can connect to it and then I can move with it. And then there's a bit of a softening and there's a bit of a space and okay, cool. So for so many of us, that's like an easier place to start. It's way more accessible to do something. At least we're still doing something, right? Like that's our norm. So start there. Do something with it, but not in like, I got to get rid of you way. In like a, hey, I want to hold your hand and I want to see what you need and let's see what we can do together. And if nothing shifts, but I'm just going to keep experimenting with these ideas, right? Um, and then maybe add on sort of the stillness and safety practice. The stillness stuff is really challenging for our systems, in part because we are such doers. A lot of us, I'm sure a lot of the people who listen to your podcast are coming from that place of like do all the time. And so stillness can be challenging for that reason. It can also be challenging because like anything that registers as traumatic involves immobilization, and immobilization when we didn't want to be immobilized. So those traumas that get stuck, there's always like this like inability to do what we wanted to do. And so stillness can kind of remind our nervous systems of that. And so yeah, it can take a little bit longer for that to feel comfortable and approachable. So starting with continuing to do something with the sensation can actually be supportive to this process.
Wow. Wow. That's not something that you hear a lot said, but
Yeah.
it makes so much sense. It's like if you feel like you're being, well, I don't know, let's say chased by a tiger, it, and you just sit there. I kind of experienced this too when I was first really starting to attune myself into my nervous system. I would always have these feelings of terror and dread.
Mm,
And I think that's exactly what you're describing is I am so stressed. I'm running from a tiger and I'm just sitting here immobilized.
yeah.
And I love what you said about just moving with it and this idea of like, walking would be that flight energy, or strength training and pushing those weights would be that fight energy. Like there's something that feels so good about exercising, and maybe it's not just the endorphins and the, the insulin sensitivity and all the, the
Yes.
super cognitive things that we try to explain exercise with. But I think of all the women right now who have gotten to a place of such stress, adrenal fatigue, I put quotation marks around that, where
Yeah.
where maybe they didn't have a good relationship with exercise like you described. So what do? They just stop exercising altogether because they feel like they're exercise intolerant, or every time they
Mhm.
exercise. But you had mentioned earlier, I love what you mentioned about how maybe there's something there with getting your heart rate up. You've associated that with some type of danger.
Yeah.
And I do think of like all the education out there right now that's like, if you over exercise, you are going to burn yourself out or
Oh, yeah.
stress yourself out. And so some of us have maybe associated exercise with, oh no, this is the thing that hurt me before. So
Hmm.
I can't do that right now. It's not safe for me. And maybe it's the actual thing that you need to mobilize some of that stress.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing about chronic fatigue and fatigue in general is like, yes, sometimes we have been so stressed that we've depleted all of our energies or resources. And so
Okay.
we can't get out of that fatigued and shut down place, or shut down state of the nervous system where you're like just collapsed. That's essentially the nervous system often will choose that state when it senses that there's no internal resources. Like you can't go into
Right.
fight or flight. So you need to like collapse at home until you recover some energy. Like that's true, that happens. And a lot, like to get out of that, we need movement. Like we need to climb back up that ladder. We actually need to go through that sympathetic state, which is really hard. And I think part of a deterrent to kind of getting out of that chronic fatigue state, because as we start to maybe move or engage with the world more, we do tend to feel our fight flight energy that was like never discharged. So then people get totally, well, okay, I tried to move and then all I felt was anxious. And so I just go back down into my fatigue state. But we have to move through that to come out of the fatigue and shut down state. And then it's interesting too, because when I was healing from whatever it was, my combination of nervous system dysregulation, mold, overdoing life, burnout situation, I like needed to move. And maybe in part I was also like a fitness instructor in a past life, and loved boot camp and all that kind of thing, and ran marathons. Like that was so my style. And so maybe part of it was just like I had parts that needed to do that to feel good. But I think a lot of it was like I had so much stuck stress in my body. And I would go online and everyone would tell me that cardio is going to like kill me or whatever. I was like, I need it. Like I was like, I couldn't. I was one of those people who needed to enter this work in a really big way by mobilizing first and then finding safety later. Right. So like I couldn't, for the longest time, I couldn't engage in any parts work if I didn't work out first, or if I didn't do more like a somatic type of mobilizing practice, something intentional to discharge the energy and then settle in and become aware of my system. So it's like that stuff, it's hard for me to read because it's so like it's spoken as if it applies to everybody, and there are cases obviously of like exercise intolerance where yeah, you got to be careful, but we really do need movement. Like we're really built to move. The nervous system expects us to move. The more stressed we are, the more movement that's expected from our nervous system. So avoiding it altogether is like, it's not going to get us too far. We have to find ways to incorporate it. And it can be tough when we have that history of like excessive exercise to know like, okay, what is listening to my body and what is listening to the part of me that thinks I need to work out this hard to be good. Right,
Right.
that can be hard to figure out, but we can usually find it, and the body at that point is usually telling us too with symptoms when we've overdone it. But yeah, I think we need movement, and I think it not just walking and not just
Right.
strength training. Like I think we need to get our heart rate up, and we always did. I think I don't know what this I think this is more in your realm of things, like this world of like, women shouldn't exercise hard. Women never have. It's like, I don't know about that. Like, I think women were probably pretty involved in getting things done, and their heart rates probably went up pretty high several times, and I think
Yeah.
we can continue to do that.
Yeah, I think about how, really, I mean, as women especially, we've always kind of evolved with this slow, steady, all day movement. Like, I think about we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the modern conveniences that we now have, like a washer and dryer, which thank God, right? But we would sit there and wash the clothes by hand, and we would sit there and, work the dough, and we would be always playing with the children, picking them up, and,
Yeah.
because we kind of lived in this more community basis. So, there was always work to be done, squatting down and picking things up. We were always, carrying water, carrying milk. Like there
Mm-hmm.
might have, and then there were going to be times where you're running or there's some, spurt of energy that's used, but we were using our bodies all day long, like this kind of very laborious work. And now our cells are like, wait a minute, what's going on? We're not using our bodies at all. We're not moving at
Mm-hmm.
all. I can't imagine how it makes us. I think it makes us feel fragile. I think it makes
Yeah.
us feel like we're like this glass that's about to just shatter and break, and it's just it doesn't work out for us. But I also think, like you said, there's so many women who this was me, an athlete all my life, moving all my life, just always had a very cognitive approach to exercise. Like I was always on a plan, always reaching a goal. And for me, getting out of that and just moving my body in a way that felt good for a couple of years was really important for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is this there's a craving for pushing my body, and when I felt that craving for pushing my body again, it was time to start challenging my body again. It wasn't like this is bad, like I can't work out, like
Yeah.
it's so bad for me. But I do wonder if all of the running that's really popular right now, like I feel like running's like getting back into popularity, and it just makes me think of what you said, like we're mobilizing that flight energy. And so many women have said, like, it's been so great for my mental health. I know the cardio is bad for me. I'm like,
Yeah.
the cardio is not bad for
No.
you. It's just using it to distract that can be a problem. But that's simple.
Yes.
It's just awareness is the answer to that.
Yeah, and if you notice your mental health is improving afterwards, like that means it's good for you because if it
Yeah.
wasn't, you would feel terrible. Like you would,
Right.
especially, I don't know how old you are. I'm like heading into my late 30s. I don't like to talk about it, but like in my 20s, yeah, okay, we got away with that a little bit more. I was definitely working out in a way that like was pushing it. Although again, I had a lot more resilience then too. I didn't have kids. I didn't have as many responsibilities. So maybe it was not as terrible as if I were to implement it now. But now our bodies do warn us. So it's like if you were going to spin, you'd probably wake up feeling like foggy and groggy if it was too much. You wouldn't wake up like with way better perspective and outlook on life. It's like your
Right.
your brain is part of your body too, right? Your brain is going to feel bad in addition to your body when you do things that aren't attuned. So you can trust
Right.
that. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, there'll be like dread there. It'll feel like you're just mustering up everything you have inside of you to make it happen.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. And then I guess looking at the flip side, so I think, we have this problem where we're not moving, but we're also not resting. So I know you talk about
Mm.
fake rest and real rest, and I think some women haven't felt real rest in years. How would you describe real rest versus like kind of this fake rest that we're all about right now?
Yeah. Um, Fake rest is like you described it earlier, like the Netflix and the bath, and it's still the bath is fine, and Netflix is fine too. I watch
Right.
plenty of TV, but it's like never giving ourselves the mind and body break, right? Like that's what
Mm.
rest looks like, and it is of course challenging because I mentioned already, like stillness is often related to times where we didn't want to be still and we had to be. It can be like a medical intervention or an assault or something horrible. It can also yeah, like be related to those busy lifestyles that we have, but stillness is a challenge. So I don't want people to just be like, okay, I'm just going to go lay in the dark for 2 hours every day. Like that's not going to feel right. But starting to have, even if it's just like mini breaks, something I heard somewhere one time was actually anytime you're switching tasks, taking 10 deep breaths. Right. So just before, so instead of like I close my laptop from here and I like grab Instagram or go to my emails right away, it's like as you're switching tasks, just take a mini break. And over time, you'll have the capacity to take longer and longer breaks. But ultimately, that like resting of the mind and body is all about that processing and digestive process that the nervous system needs, that our brain needs. And what's cool is that we are designed to do it automatically. So you don't have to go and be like, okay, I'm going to think about everything that happened in the last hour and make sense of it and figure it out. And, it's not, that's because that's still not restful.
Right.
But when we lie down and we just breathe and there's nothing, the brain starts to do that. Like it just starts to like, oh, okay, what do I need to retain from what happened and what can I let go of? This also happens when we walk and when we get adequate REM sleep. So there's these like automatic processing mechanisms in the brain so that we don't remain kind of bombarded with these short-term memories, right? So when we don't move short-term memories into long-term memory, we have like just too much information. We just like we all that stuff that we take in, which is already way too much, we keep it and we've got it all. It's like I went to the grocery store and I saw this thing on Instagram, and it's like all of the emotional impacts of that too remain stuck in this place where it's impacting us in day to day. So when we practice stillness and we are kind of regulating our nervous systems enough that we're getting REM sleep at night and we're going for those silent walks, like then things can move and process and assimilate. And that's kind of what like rest is. Restoration. It should feel restorative. It should feel like afterwards we come out of it and we have more energy. And it can be, I think people get really like they think when I talk about this that it means like, okay, I want you to rest as much as you are active during the day. And like, we're not built for that either. Like, we are really meant to be engaged with with the world most of the time. And we only need like we need these mini resets. So it can be, yeah, that anytime we're changing tasks, take a few breaths. It can be once a day for half an hour, 20 minutes. I'm going to like lay down and like do some guided breathing or do like a non-sleep deep rest practice or whatever, right? Like anything I can tolerate, I'm going to do that every day just to give that little digestive break. And then I'm going to carry on with busyness. And it's so profound. It really is, like the impact that can have.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that is so powerful. I think you had mentioned one time that productivity that um, results in something good that you have created, benefiting people, like that feels good. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now we are so kind of impulsively busy all the time. We try to just stay busy with insignificant things. But if we're really intentional about our rest and our work, we can find a lot of healing there. It doesn't have to be perfectly balanced. It's just about being attuned.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Wow, your work is just so powerful, and just reading some of your stuff has just such profoundly impacted me. And I'm sure my audience is thinking, I mean, I could keep you here forever, but I'm sure my audience is thinking like, oh, how do I get more of this? Where do I find Jenna? How do I get involved in her work? Like, just tell us all about where to find you and what you offer.
Yeah, sure. My Instagram handle is felt sense and then it's WPG. People never know. Like they think it's like all one word, felt sense whoopig. Anyway, felt sense WPG. It is all in one word. And then I have a membership. It's $25 a month Canadian, which right now the Canadian dollar sucks. It's very cheap for Americans. And that's just where I have a ton of these practices. So around safety, around mobilizing, heart's work, all the things. And it's guided. So you kind of start and, learn a little bit. That might be repetitive now if you've listened to this podcast, but you'll kind of learn a little bit and then you'll try it on. What does that feel like to actually do in real time? And then the practices are kind of just available to you to pick and choose as you get to know yourself and like which ones work for me and which ones don't and what do I need at what time. So there's that. And then I have an ebook as well, which is really for the people who are more heady with it. So it's like the same content, but in more in depth. And what I found is a lot of people who are drawn to my work because I'm a thinker they're also thinkers. And it's kind of like those protective parts, because they are thinking parts, are protective. They won't let them do this stuff until it makes total sense. And so the book is really for people who are like, okay, I need to get it. I really need to get everything about this, because otherwise I'm not willing to try another thing that might hurt me, right? And so many people have tried a billion things and they're like, I'm not going down this again unless I know for sure that it makes sense for me to. So those are my two things right now. I can only work one-on-one with people in 2 provinces in Canada that I'm licensed in. So that is limited. But that's it. That's what I have. That's me.
That's amazing. Those 2 offerings sound amazing and so well thought out too for who you're working with. So incredible. Well, I hope everyone checks it out. I know I'm going to go check it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for all that you've shared with us. It's just so incredible. I've learned so much today. I love learning from you, so thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was fun.
If you're looking for any of the links or the resources discussed today, they are included in the show notes, which are linked in the description box below. And if you enjoyed the episode and want to support the podcast, please share about it with others, share about it on social media, or like this video and subscribe. I really rely on amazing women like you in our community to spread the word about the podcast. And with that being said, I also really value your ideas and thoughts about the podcast. So if you have any topics you'd like discussed or guests you'd like me to bring on, please go to jessicaashwellness.com/podcast to share that with me. The website is down just for a period of time, but bear with us and keep checking back. It will be up soon. And if you want more content or want to stay in the loop about new episode drops, follow me on Instagram at jessicaashwellness and sign up for my Sunday email at jessicaashwellness.com/email-subscribe. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you soon.